Hey, YouTube. So this is going to be an IRS whistleblower recap that I'm going to try to condense about 6 hours worth of testimony into an hour, not counting my introduction. And I'm going to call some honest balls and strikes. I'm going to look at some of the good and bad arguments, all that refer to the facts of the case. Any political grandstanding, anything of that nature, I'm going to cut it out of there. Any repeated facts that we're going to hear over and over again for people to set up their arguments, I'm going to cut those out as well and just cover everything once here. If you think I covered your side unfairly, leave a comment, and if it's a good one, I'll amend how I do things in the future. If people tend to like something like this, then maybe I'll go back and cover some hearings of the Trump era, like the Ukraine impeachment I have in mind. So, if you pay attention to politics, you'll know that after this hearing, Senator Chuck Grassley released a tax form that kind of linked Joe Biden to this. But at the time of the hearing, that was not yet public information. It is cited here a little bit, but nobody here knows about it. So I'm going to cover this hearing as though it hasn't been released yet. So let's start out with some opening statements here. The GOP opens up with a few of their claims. 1, Hunter got a sweetheart deal because he's the president's son. 2, the IRS recommends several felony charges that were squashed in many ways. 3, Trump appointed a U.S. attorney named Weiss, who changed their position several times, and the GOP is claiming that shoots out their credibility. Number 4, no special counsel or investigator was put on the president's family who was being investigated. GOP claim number 5, FBI agents came out to back this story and also asserted more facts. And number 6, I kind of think it's a bad argument, is that the DOJ is bad because they call parents terrorists and Christians extremists. The last point was made by Jim Jordan, and he is no Trey Gowdy, that's for sure. Seems like he was just doing a little clip farming here. So going into the Democrats' opening points here from their opening statements, they first claim there is no proof Hunter Biden got a sweetheart deal, and there is also no proof that Joe Biden is linked at all to this investigation or anything that happened with this prosecution. They state that eyewitness testimony and records don't cut it for concrete information or proof. Their next claim is crimes involving taxes happen to 10 million people in the United States a year, and most of them don't even get charged with anything, let alone felonies. So this is unfair treatment to Hunter Biden. 3rd, the GOP's star witness is a gun-running felon who worked with and for China, and it was unregistered with our government. Okay. Rudy Giuliani's investigator and Trump, both Rudy Giuliani's personal investigator and Trump's U.S. attorney Weiss, they both say that there was nothing here to charge, and that's why they didn't charge. And finally, the last Democrat claim is that the GOP are hypocrites, and they are looking past worse corruption under the Trump administration, which I kind of think is a bad point, because it has nothing to do with the facts of the case. Now, try to do your best to remember these, but I'm going to keep pulling these back up as testimony and questioning either refutes them or backs them. So, first, we're going to open up with witness number 1 of 2. His name is Ziegler, and he wants to make it very clear that he is a gay Democrat who is being called a traitor and a pick-me for standing up for what he believes is just. So he's leading with identity politics, and I'll say you convinced me that you're a Democrat right there with a nail in the head, man. It's exactly what they do. But he seems like a decent dude, and he first goes into trying to refute media claims that state he was gaining something from this, saying he's paid out of pocket, he hasn't taken a dime from anybody for help, and this is not a good career move for him. He's been cut off from the leadership of the IRS and likens this experience to coming out as gay for the first time and how people treated him. So, to put it callously, he's trying to build a sympathy card. Now, the claims that the witnesses have something to gain from this get brought up later in the hearing, so I'm not going to dig too deep into those yet. So here's what he's actually claiming around the facts of the case. He claims Hunter Biden's memoir and his bank accounts of his life don't add up to the tax filings and his actual bank records. He claims Biden's actions, Hunter Biden, I'm sorry. If I say Biden, I'm referring to Hunter Biden. If I'm talking about Joe Biden, I'll refer to him specifically. But the Biden here is always going to be Hunter Biden. So he claims Biden's actions that he took were clearly willful ignorance, because he was stating that he was doing X while filing Y on his taxes, knowingly avoiding paying taxes on payments he got from companies, as well as writing off things like drugs and prostitution, as well as other things we're going to get into. So if these claims are true, it immediately undercuts the Democrats' opening point that this is just like 10 million other Americans that have tax issues every year. This is a little bit bigger than that. And his next claim, Hunter initially underreported his income by $250,000 in the first year that they investigated him, and several felony charges were dropped without explanation, and others were delayed until they ran out of statute of limitation. This kind of backs the GOP's sweetheart deal claim a little bit, but it's definitely not enough to label that as true, so just keep it in the back of your mind for now. These are just the opening statements and the claims they're making. Hunter will also not need to amend his 2018 tax returns, 2014 and 15, 2017 and 18. The only ones still up for this are the 2019 tax returns. None of them will have to be amended, where he made illegal deductions for prostitutions, and he labeled Joe Biden as his business partner as paying for his hotel rooms. This is also going to come up when we get to old Marge as well. So Ziegler next claims that Weiss said he agreed that the 2014 and 2015 charges that were out of Washington, D.C., he agreed with prosecuting them, but he then stated that those charges would somehow hurt the 2017 and 2019 charges that were all felonies and actually worse. Ziegler explains that he never understood the logic behind this. It was just asserted to him. So remember these charges, because all of them are going to come up again. There's two charging years from 2014 to 2015, and then 3 charging years from 2017 to 2019. 4 of those years charging felonies, 1 of them not. 2015 charges were the ones that were just misdemeanors. Everything else, 2014, 17, 18, and 19, were all felony charges. He next claims that slow walking was done. That was not normal to any investigation he's ever taken part in, especially ones of this magnitude, as well as several other roadblocks were put in place, like being unable to follow up on leads, ask about key family members Hunter Biden mentioned in texts and calls and emails, and when he was turned down, it was to by the assistant U.S. attorney out of Delaware. Her name was Lindsay Wolf. So he claims the DOJ hamstrung Weiss, the U.S. Delaware attorney, the Delaware U.S. attorney, and backs up that Weiss also agreed with him with the charges at first. And his last major claim here is that he and his co-employees were trying to move this from a special attorney to a special counsel because it was a conflict of interest that Biden appointees were now in charge of this case after Biden won the 2020 election. So he goes on to explain some things like IRS investigators and prosecutors all worked together. They all looked at the evidence. This was a bipartisan team. They decided that they were felony charges based on this. Prosecutors and investigators. These gentlemen are investigators. Now, we're going to hear a lot about this. The Democrats are going to start claiming that there's a lot of disagreement between prosecutors and investigators. So this is a very important claim that he's saying that all the prosecutors he worked with, a team of 4 prosecutors that worked for the IRS, prosecutors in the DOJ tax division, and others agreed with these points, including the U.S. attorney and the assistant U.S. attorney, all agreed that these were some pretty big points and that the felony charges were within merit, but then they never materialized into anything. So there's some pretty damning stuff that kind of hurts the Democrats' claims right at the boat, and that's going to happen by nature of who called this House session. The witnesses are going to be witnesses they want to hear from, so the minority in the House, which is the Democrats in this circumstance, are going to kind of be on their back foot. And I want you to kind of remember that when you're listening to some of these arguments, because the Democrats are at a disadvantage going into this. And so it's a little harder for them to do a good job because of that. So I'm going to give them a little credit when they do. Now, he does give a little bit of a life raft to the Democrats here, and he says the Hunter Biden plea deal that he received, where he only had to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanors and all the felony charges were dropped, on face value, there's nothing wrong with that. And he says that the red flags that were raised during the investigation and then the plea deal is what makes the plea deal nefarious. So it kind of undercuts the GOP claim that this is set in stone, that two tiers of justice, and that Joe Biden was involved in this in any way. And we're going to get into it. So now the second witness is a gentleman named Mr. Shapley. And actually, you know what? Instead of MGT holding up porn, I'll show you these guys. These are the opening statements here. Okay, this is Ziegler. He is the gay Democrat, as he wanted us to know several times. And this is Shapley, this gentleman here. This dude is not here to play games with his opening statement. He's not trying to garner sympathy, and he goes right into some pretty decent points after he discusses how he worked his way up the IRS totem pole. He's a lead investigator with a bunch of agents under him. He's in a pretty high position in the IRS, and he's had a long history of investigating both Republicans and Democrats and returning tens of billions of taxpayer dollars back to the taxpayer that were fraudulently taken in his IRS investigations. Now, there is a little bit of grandstanding, and I'm going to skip it, so let's go to his claims directly. This is going to be a little out of order if you watch his testimony and then read my recap. My recap is not in the chronological order he says these things in. He just bounces around so damn much, I felt like it'd be better if I editorialized it a little bit. So, his first claim is a two-track is the word he uses, two-track justice system in play. He says that case was unlike any other of the hundreds of cases he ever worked at the IRS, and decisions made at every stage benefit Hunter Biden, which is at the very least unorthodox and at the very most signifier of corruption. Prosecutors hid evidence from investigators. DOJ slow-walked several steps so that to push these indictments of Hunter Biden past the 2020 election, or let the statutes of limitation fall off when the ones that were pushed past the 2020 election, and then put Biden appointed judges and prosecutors in charge of actually charging these charges against them in these districts. And I'm going to get into the details of that too, special privileges for U.S. attorneys and whatnot. So just give me a little bit. Investigators here were not allowed to access Hunter Biden's iCloud leak or his laptop at their own discretion. They were given tidbits of it that they were told were all they needed to see. And we knew at this time that was Hunter Biden's laptop long before the New York Post story that was blocked prior to the 2020 election. It was verified that the FBI knew in, I think, 2018 or 2019, that it was actually a Hunter Biden laptop for 100%. Now, to clarify, they don't get to see parts of the evidence. They did get to see parts of the evidence. Okay, cool. So his next claim, Weiss and Wolf, the U.S. Attorney out of Delaware, and his assistant U.S. Attorney out of Delaware, agreed that probable cause existed, but refused to back the warrant search of Biden's home over optics, since Joe Biden was running in the Democratic primary. Now, also, we're going to get deeper into that, but the DOJ and the IRS and investigating teams have a standard, and since Joe Biden wasn't actually the nominee at the time, he was just running in the primary, those standards hadn't yet kicked in. But again, we'll get into that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. His next claim, investigators were instructed not to ask about Dad or the bid guy, or in the contents of some of the emails, texts, and call logs that they had for Hunter Biden. And again, it was confirmed by the FBI agent backing these men that this was the case, that they were stonewalled on asking any questions about Joe Biden to the people that they were interviewing. Joe Biden's campaign was tipped off of the fact that the IRS was going to interview Hunter Biden the day before. And we're going to get into that as well, who tipped them off, what was the result of it. But ultimately, it ended up in the IRS never actually getting that interview that they were setting up for, because Hunter Biden was tipped off and he got away from it. He claims that the charges that didn't fall off, did fall off due to time. So the charges that fell off due to the statute of limitations, the 2014 and 2015 charges, he claims that they were initially slow-walked in order to allow them to fall off. And he claims that Weiss just kind of let that happen. And it's actually admitted that Weiss did let that happen because he didn't think there was much there. But that being said, going into the next point, that's all of his claims. So he does a little bit of moral grandstanding here before, during, and after his claims, and he does some both sidesism and nonpartisan, blah, blah, blah. I care about the integrity of the law. It's not important to the facts of the case, so skip. He covers most of the same facts as Ziegler as well, so skip. One important fact that he brings up, he brings it back to Ziegler's points, he elaborates on it a bit more, is that Hunter Biden's legal team was working with investigators to expand the statute of limitations on the 2014 felonies and 2015 misdemeanors involving the Burisma payments, and despite the fact that they were expanding the statute of limitations to continue the investigation, Weiss denied that negotiation and just let them fall off and expire. So we're going to get into why. I'm just kind of covering his introduction statement now. So now for the part that really turned me off about this dude a little bit here. So he brings up Merrick Garland. Garland states under oath that he left this investigation in the hands of the Trump appointee to Congress. But that Trump appointee, Weiss, is later alleged to have said that he didn't actually have the final call to charge. No, that's just fine. I'm not angry about that point. So he claims that the U.S. attorney, but he's basically saying Merrick Garland testified under oath that he said false things. And he's saying it in a kind of a damning way about Merrick Garland. He also claims the U.S. attorney was the one in charge of going to trial and had the full backing of the DOJ. But according to the allegations they're making against Weiss, that was not the case, and he was denied special authority. Special authority is needed if you're a U.S. attorney out of Delaware and you want to charge somebody for crimes in D.C., and the U.S. attorney in D.C. doesn't want to partner with you, then you then have to go and apply for special authority to charge. And the claims are that Weiss applied for that special authority and was denied. And we're going to go back and forth on that. But Weiss even states in his second letter to Congress that he was geologically limited. And that geological limit means that he couldn't make those charges without special attorney privileges that, again, they're claiming he was denied. Now, when he's making these claims about Merrick Garland saying all these false things under oath, the part that he should have let in with is that I'm not saying Merrick Garland lied and I have no proof that he lied. But he says that to the end. And to me, that looks like he was trying to allow people to form their opinions before this statement came out. And it was just a caveat at the end so he didn't get in trouble. I really think he should have let in with that. Merrick Garland said some things under oath that weren't true, but I do not have any proof he was lying, and then go into the point. I just kind of don't like his framing here. So this is it for the opening statements. The GOP's opening claims align much closer to what the witnesses said. But we got a long way to go, and the Democrats could be a late blooming flower, so let's hold your horses for a minute and just kind of get into the nitty gritty of it before you make any conclusions based off the introduction. We're about to get into questioning, and each member of the House committee starts out with recapping a lot of the facts of the case before they get into their questions. So I'm going to skip a lot of that because a lot of these people bring up the same points and reiterate them over and over so they can get to their questions. I don't want to say the same thing 15 times in a row, so I'm going to skip over that if they have nothing new to bring to the table and don't ask any questions that reveal any new data. I'm also going to skip over some things that don't involve the facts of the case because some people do a lot of grandstanding. I'm going to skip over all the partisan attacks except for the ones that refute the claims made in the opening statements. So if somebody just attacks all Democrats as being hypocrites, I'm not going to cover that. What I am going to cover is if someone goes after the Democrats for some claims they made in their opening statements and uses evidence to debunk them. That, I think, is more within merit. So we're going to go to the first speaker, and it is going to be the chairman of the House, a Mr. Comer. So Mr. Comer starts off with Ziegler, and where they do reference these parts of the report, I will try to bring it up. So on page 99 to 100 of his transcript, they start recapping the money that Hunter Biden got, just laying down the groundwork of the case, it seems like. So Hunter and his partners, who are his partners? There's some gentlemen we're going to bring up, but there's also a lot of family members, adult grandkids of Joe Biden, Joe Biden's brother, and a few other Bidens as well. There's a New York Post article if you really want to get into the details of that, but Hunter and his partners got $3.1 million from a business in Romania, and that's how they announce it in here, as a business in Romania. They never say its name. $3 million from State Energy HK to Robertson Walker LLC, which is owned by Rob Walker, one of Hunter Biden's partners, and he is going to be brought up later. $3 million from a Chinese company, CEFC Infrastructure, and that went to Hunter's personal corporation, Owasco PC, which nobody can seem to figure out what Owasco PC actually did. Hudson West 3 gave Hunter Biden and his partners $3.7 million. Burisma in Ukraine gave Hunter and his partners $7.3 million. But some of that wasn't direct cash. It was used to pay attorney fees. That was just the total of out-of-pocket expenses for Burisma. So between 2014 and 2019, the income stream to Hunter Biden partners and family members was around $19 million, roughly, that we're talking here. And he paid taxes on none of it. Neither did a lot of the family members. So some of these people who received this money were grandkids, blah, blah, blah. I already went over that. So personally, I think it's nice that a group of foreign nationals from a massive foreign company just randomly gives six figures to one child in need. One or two children in need in the United States. What a great act of altruism. And what luck that those children are in the same family that had the last name Biden, huh? Weird. So Comey asks, also, don't take my jokes as partisan. I'm just trying to be funny to make it a little lighter to listen to. I kind of side with the GOP here at the end of the day. But again, by nature of the hearing, it's going to be set up to be something that benefits the GOP. Why would they call the hearing if it didn't? So any reasonable person would probably lean slightly toward the GOP after this hearing. In my mind, anyways. So Comer asks what steps Shapley wanted to take regarding President Biden that they were stonewalled on, that they were denied on. And he states that in the normal course of the investigation, if the father is involved in somebody's finances, like mentioned that he's sitting right next to me, or the big guy, or that he gets 10%, or that Hunter Biden was paying for his rooms out of business, his hotel rooms out of business expenses, then you normally go and ask this person, at least investigate, at least follow up, at least interview them. And they were denied access to this. Not just didn't do it, they were told they were not allowed to talk to Joe Biden about any of his involvement in this. They were also denied access to Biden's family members, including his adult grandchildren. They were denied access to the Hunter Biden laptop. They were denied access to the iCloud leak, and only given tidbits of that the prosecutors said that they needed. So they weren't allowed to look at it with their own discretion. And they were also denied warrants to search a storage unit, denied by Assistant U.S. Attorney Wolf. And they were denied a search warrant on Hunter Biden's living quarters at the time, which was a guest home for Joe Biden. And the reason for this was they were citing the optics of going after the son of somebody who's running in a presidential primary, which we'll find out isn't actually part of their policy. That policy kicks in once Joe Biden actually becomes the nominee, not during the primary process. So Comer drops that point and moves on to the next one, which is the WhatsApp message between Hunter Biden and Gongwen Dong of CEFC Infrastructure, and a $100,000 check that went directly to Hunter Biden's corporation, Owasco PC, with no explanation. Basically just right into Hunter's pocket. And they keep going into this quote here that the Bidens are the best I know at doing exactly what the chairman wants from this partnership. And they're talking about G and the CCP, obviously. I wrote Mao in my notes. It's funny. Shapley states that he wanted to follow up and was denied access. He wanted to find out, since Hunter Biden said my dad's sitting right next to me, they wanted to go and get location data on Joe Biden's cell phone from that night to see if he was actually sitting next to him, and they were denied access to that. They were not allowed to follow up on any leads of Hunter Biden mentioning Joe Biden. So we don't know. But what we do know is they were just told, no, you're not allowed to do that. Now, we don't know if Hunter Biden was lying about his dad sitting next to him, and he very well could have been. But the fact that they weren't allowed to follow up on this is pretty, it backs the GOP claim. It doesn't prove it, but it makes it more plausible, if that makes sense. We also find out that there was much more to the conversation, but the House Ways and Means Committee has to release that. We're going to hear that a lot. These two gentlemen are only allowed to testify about what was in their initial statements, and it's a lot, but it's not everything. So if we wanted to see more of this WhatsApp conversation, House Ways and Means Committee has to release it. It's hard to say. All right. So the next speaker after Comer, and Comer did a pretty good job, man. You can see he's part of the A-team here. Is the next speaker is going to be Raskin. It's the gentleman to his left here. And if anyone could tell me why he's wearing a bandana, I guess I could Google it. If he has some sort of ailment, my heart goes out to him, because I really think Raskin did a stellar job here playing from the back foot. And I can't say enough good stuff about how good of an attorney he is. I don't know about him as a human being or anything like that, but in terms of like a defense attorney, he's doing a great job here. So again, keep in mind they're on the back foot. This is a GOP-led House session with GOP-friendly witnesses. So Democrats are playing from behind on defense. They have a weaker stance. And I still grade Raskin very high. Raskin and another guy we're going to get to later, I grade them very high because of the disadvantage they're facing. So let's get into what he's... So Raskin comes in and he drops his expertise as a prosecutor from the past, that a prosecutorial understanding of the charges and how courtrooms work are their specialty, and investigators know nothing about these things. So Raskin brings up how crimes are often discovered by investigators, but they aren't charged by prosecutors almost 90% of the time. But his way to use this, the example he uses is Trump, and he starts talking about Trump's indictment over taking documents back to Mar-a-Lago, and it really falls flat. I think this is his biggest mistake, is bringing up Trump here. There's probably much better examples of like investigators finding chargeable offenses and prosecutors not charging without going into partisan attacks. I really think this is his low point in his 5 minutes here. Otherwise, he's fantastic. So he also makes comments that there are often disagreements between investigators, and he kind of uses that to the point that like he really thinks this is just a misunderstanding between the investigators and the prosecutors. Now, it's a very solid argument tactic. It really is like a great defense of the prosecutorial actions to not charge felonies against Hunter Biden. The thing is, he gives Shapley a chance to speak, and Shapley replies that U.S. Attorney Weiss, Assistant U.S. Attorney Wolf, counsel of 4 IRS prosecutors, and the DOJ Tax Division of Prosecutors all recommended bringing charges in the prosecution report. So it kind of undercuts his good argument there. That being said, he still does a solid job. We then go over how the U.S. Attorney Weiss wanted to charge anywhere, or if he wanted to charge anywhere but Delaware, he would need to partner with a U.S. attorney. As I was kind of saying earlier in the introduction, he would need to, if the U.S. attorney in Delaware wanted to charge somebody in D.C., he would need to partner with the U.S. attorney in D.C. Now, if the U.S. attorney in D.C. decided, no, I don't want to do that, I'm busy, or I don't believe in the charges, he then has to go and seek special attorney privileges. And the 2 witnesses are claiming he was denied those, and they know that because he flat out told them, I was denied special attorney privileges to prosecute in D.C. And it's sort of asserted or backed up by the second letter he sent to Jim Jordan, saying he was geologically isolated and unable to charge in anywhere but Delaware. So it kind of backs it up, but there is more to that letter we're going to get to. So, but this is their case for stonewalling, and he says the U.S. attorney never got either permissions to charge in any of the areas we're talking about. It's a pretty good rebuttal. It kind of slaps down Raskin's point a little bit, but it's not backed yet. We'll get there. So then he jumps to Ziegler and asks how Hunter can be charged with tax evasion even though he paid those taxes. And Ziegler makes him aware that taxes are due on a specific day, and even if he paid them late, he still broke the law by not paying them on time. And he kind of does his job there to rebut that. So Raskin jumps back to Shapley and asks if about his crossing the line moment. He had a meeting with Weiss where he said this is where Weiss said he was not the sole person in charge of bringing charges against Hunter Biden, that there was somebody over his head that was denying him. And this was his red line moment, and he keeps pushing his narrative that this is just a misunderstanding, and he brings up the 3 letters that Weiss sent, where in all 3 of the letters, he does claim that he is the sole decider in bringing charges. Though Raskin is kind of cherry-picking those letters a little bit because there was more to them, essentially saying Weiss is kind of blowing open their narrative that he was stonewalled by other prosecutors and being denied special attorney privileges. So he states that he has contact with U.S. attorneys to see if they want to partner, and yes, blah, blah, blah. I went through all that already. So we're going to have to hear from Weiss, I feel like, is my conclusion to all this, to see, what the bottom of this is, because both the Democrats and the Republicans are using the exact same letters and coming up with 2 different narratives. So I think we have to hear from Weiss in order to kind of get to the bottom of this. Anyways, Raskin, quoting Weiss, states that due to the death of Beau Biden, he was still weighing out the charges in 2014 and 2015 and didn't know if he wanted to prosecute yet. Weiss declared that he did not want to a few months later, and that was the decision to let the charges fall off, the statute of limitations that the charges fall off. And then these crimes went uncharged, but on top of that, Hunter Biden never had to amend his taxes, never had to pay anything for his crimes in 2014 and 2015 on those very same taxes because the statute of limitations fell off. They could have settled with him and just had to pay those taxes and made all the crimes go away, but they didn't do that. They just let him go scot-free. So he uses this narrative to question the witnesses, and the witnesses say, no, this is contradicted by other statements from Weiss that they heard directly, and Shapley says that he was in the room with Weiss, Ziegler, 5 other attorneys, and nobody has publicly contradicted what he's saying about what Weiss said in that meeting. So that's a pretty good point, but again, we're going to have to hear from Weiss really to get to the bottom of this specific point. So this does not... Oh yeah, so the witnesses start trying to filibuster a little bit here and kind of answer more than what Raskin is asking, and it kind of looks bad, but then the ranking member starts asking them questions and cuts them off. So it kind of looks bad on him as well, and maybe it's warranted because they were filibustering and he knew he had to reclaim his time, but it hurts the narrative a bit when he doesn't let them answer. So he is an A-team guy for sure, but after he's done, Ziegler is allowed to answer the question he was cut off for, and he talks about how Raskin is conflating several different types of tax crimes to essentially obfuscate, accusing him of obfuscating that Hunter's crimes were significantly worse than the 10 million crimes we see in the United States yearly from people filing their taxes wrong and not paying them. He cites the DOJ manual and says that selecting which charge they want to prosecute and which charges they don't, if they want to prosecute a misdemeanor and not the felony that's tied into it, that doesn't work. And we're going to get into that later when we start talking about DOJ standard practices. But this is it for Mr. Raskin, and I think overall he did a bang-up job. He set up some good narratives, and we're going to jump into the next gentleman here. And I think this is the start of the B team here. Mr. Smith is up, and he goes to Shapley's Exhibit 2, page 41. Prosecution recommendation report written by the investigators. Now, to rebut the claims made by Raskin, Shapley goes right into where they worked hand in hand with prosecutors at every step of the way, and there was no investigator versus prosecutor disagreement that Raskin's alluding to. Shapley states the level of confidence they had in the recommending charges is validated by IRS criminal investigation team. Prosecutors agreed that these charges should be filed. Senior leadership at the IRS agreed with him, and the DOJ tax division needed to sign off on it, but they said that they agreed to him. That being said, there was a little misconduct by the DOJ that were potential misconduct, alleged misconduct by the DOJ. So also, U.S. Attorney Weiss agreed that these charges had merit and reached out to get the process started, with the most notable action being that he contacted the D.C. prosecutor to start the process of getting these charges filed, and the D.C. prosecutor said he didn't want to have anything to do with it, and that made Weiss have to turn around and apply for special attorney privileges. Now, if Weiss didn't think these charges had merit, as he says later on a few years later, then why did he go this far into the process? Why did he tell them these charges had merit? Why did he start the process to begin prosecution of these charges is Shapley's point. It's pretty solid. So even Wolf, the assistant prosecutor, agreed that these were felony charges, and what essentially happened is every felony was dropped. Hunter Biden pled guilty to 2 misdemeanors from 3 years and pretty much got off just almost scot-free. So Smith bounces to Ziegler now, and this is going to be brief, where he stated he was trying to interview Biden family members that were some of the business partners receiving money from foreign nationals, and he was warned it could land him in very hot water with the internal politics of the IRS, and he discusses later on what that hot water was, but it looks like he was threatened with legal repercussions. He then repeats how this was strange in terms of any investigation due to them being witnesses directly related to the facts of the case. Like, again, Joe Biden is brought up several times. He says, my dad. He says the big guy, JB. He's writing off tax expenses and paying for hotel rooms for his dad and whatnot. Again, all this could be lies. All that he could have been getting that hotel room for a prostitute. But they weren't allowed to look into it, so we don't know. They were stonewalled in their investigation. And that's a big deal. So that's why we don't have the facts of this case, because they were told they weren't allowed to. So we're now on to the next guy. And you'll notice this goes Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. We're going into Mr. Krishnamurthy. Sorry, I butchered your name, man. It's a tough one. Ziegler, page 12 of his deposition transcript. This investigation started after Ziegler reviewed bank deposits, social media, Hunter's financial records, and other information that contradicted tax reports from Hunter Biden. Another concern was raised that Barr consolidated these charges under a rather small U.S. attorney's office in Delaware that wasn't equipped for a case of this magnitude. He states that it should have been done in D.C., on the Trump-appointed attorney in D.C., but it wasn't. So Krishnamurthy brings up Ziegler's concerns about how prosecutors want to handle the case with extreme care due to Biden being a declared candidate. He's essentially building the case that since Biden was running in the primary, he was a declared candidate, and any type of overt investigation would have been election interference. He goes back to the point where Biden was not yet in office at the time, so he couldn't have anything to do with his stonewalling, and Shapley is given time to finish at the end. Shapley states that's because he was the nominee at the time. The DOJ elections clause kicks in when he becomes the nominee, and that's why it wasn't being followed. So they were trying to get this done in April of 2022 when the election meddling clause didn't kick in until September of that year when he became the nominee. So he kind of rebuts Krishnamurthy's point a bit, but you can see what narrative they're setting up, that Joe Biden wasn't in office. How could he have been involved in this? Essentially, it's Hunter. It's not Joe Biden. So it can't be Joe Biden. He wasn't in office, etc., etc., and that's going to be elaborated on later. So now we're off to Mr. Jim Jordan of Ohio. Jim Jordan directly goes at Raskin's claims that Weiss stated he had the final say in prosecution. Now, they go back and forth on this a bit. Jim Jordan got 3 letters from U.S. Attorney Weiss, and he's going to cite them. Well, Jordan brings up in the same month, he got 3 letters in March, in the month of June. The first letter, Weiss states that he had ultimate prosecutorial authority to prosecute where and when he wanted. The second letter said he still had the final say, but that he did not have ultimate authority, that he was geologically limited. And that's what Jordan is bringing up, is that he was geologically limited. He had to go apply for the special attorney, blah, blah, blah. I already went over that twice now. So, that's what he's bringing up again. Now, if true, this kind of breaks Raskin's point wide open, and it feels like Jordan's just summarizing it in order to do that. What he does here is speculate why Weiss sent that second letter of clarification that kind of walked back his statements from the first one, and it's because Shapley's testimony went public. Everyone had access to it, and it made Weiss look bad, so Weiss had to further elaborate and kind of walk back his statements. So next they jumped to a meeting between Shapley and Weiss in October, and this is the red line meeting I kind of was alluding to. They're going to dive a little deeper into it. It was in the same year where he reiterated the points from the second letter, that he was geologically limited in prosecution, and he was being told no from the DC attorney and being told no on special prosecuting, special privileges to prosecute. And this is brought up a lot because this is a very big, this is his red line. This is where he decided to become a whistleblower. And again, this is where Shapley restates that there were 6 other people in the meeting besides him and Weiss, and nobody has publicly come out and claimed that Shapley's summary was incorrect. So Shapley documented this interview in a summary with an email immediately after the meeting. And it's going to be Exhibit 10 if you want to go take a look at it. But he says in that email He sent it to his supervisors and other people for verification, and they said it was 100% accurate and thanked him for his honesty. So his summary of that meeting was said to be 100% accurate by other people in the meeting. And that's backed up by other eyewitness testimony only. After this info went public, we saw Weiss write a third letter, and they never really elaborate here what is in that third letter. Jim Jordan just says they changed the story a third time. We don't know how. So that's where he leaves it off and starts doing his grandstanding and clip farming. Now, these are kind of the summary of the big facts here, so I'm going to start blowing through a lot of these because these 4 initial speakers had a lot to say, and we're going to have a lot of not-so-good speakers here in the House. It's going to go pretty quick. I'm going to cover AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, a couple other people that are memes, and I'm going to cover a couple good people later, but you got like 80% of the information that was covered at this hearing just from these 4 speakers. So we're now on to a Mr. Lynch. Here he is. He starts by calling out other politicians on the committee and starts talking about previous hearings, never bringing up any facts of this case. If you want to hear more about Manafort, Flint, and Roger Stone, you can, but that has nothing to do with this. It's just partisan grandstanding. Skip. See how easy that was. We're on to Mr. Timmons. Mr. Timmons said he's here to simplify this for you, and he's going to do a recap. And I have to say to that, bitch, you better back the fuck up. This is my job, not yours. Thank you. Partisan grandstanding pretty much the entire time, and skip. We're on to Mr. Connolly, and let's see if it's his turn to grandstand. He is attacking the last speaker, Mr. Timmons, and now he's doing his own job trying to summarize the narrative in his way. And he starts talking about Trump. Skip. Now we're on to Mr. Turner. Let's see if he's got anything new. He's also recapping. Great. But at least he's on topic, and he's not talking about things unrelated like the last few were. He wants to talk about the charges against Hunter. So a new little factoid has been brought into this, and I feel like since we have something new finally after a half an hour of people grandstanding, I should bring it up. So apparently Hunter claimed that some of the money he received from, I think, Burisma, some of the money he received out of that $19 million, we'll just say to be sure, that was a loan, which he didn't pay. He stated on his taxes that it was a loan, and he didn't pay taxes for it. And Turner uses the witness's expertise to prove that this was, at best, disingenuous, and at worst, a lie on his taxes. The company that gave him the money declared it a deduction, not a loan, as well as Hunter's accountant didn't declare it a loan either. So, other than that one factoid, it's just all grandstanding. So, we're going to go to Mrs. Norton here, and then we're going to take our 90-minute break. So, more recapping, more narrative building, no new facts, no new claims. But she seems very nice. She's very kind. I like her. I like listening to her at least. But yeah, skip. So now we got a recess, and the first speaker when we come back is a Mr. Palmer, and this is the 2-hour mark. We're already 1/3 of the way through this thing. We're just burning through this bad boy, and let me check my time here. 43 minutes. I thought I was going to do even better. So Mr. Palmer brings up the FD 1023 form that Chuck Grassley released after this hearing that I covered in my introduction. So maybe we will be able to get into it, but the witnesses have never seen this document. They're asked to speculate. They say they don't want to. They talk about more of the stonewalling, blah, blah, blah. I never really dive into the contents of this document, so skip. All right, Mr. Khanna is up. He brings up how prosecutors have disagreed with Mr. Sharpley's assessments in the past, and as we said, it's about 90% of the time a prosecutor or an investigator wants to charge, the prosecutor says no. So it's only like 10% of the time they actually charge. And Shapley knows that. He admits that, and he says that this was not the same. It was a little different. Mr. Khanna asked Shapley if he respects his fellow IRS agents, prosecutors, and blah, blah, blah. It's real C-team stuff, and it's very poorly put together character attack. It's almost like a child's trying to emulate what Raskin did, and it's very bad. But one thing he actually does here is he adds a new stake to the argument. says, do you swear today under oath that you did not speak with any reporter on this matter? Trying to get to Shapley's credibility that he was the leaker. He was the one that leaked the story out. He was the one that leaked his testimony. And that's what got this process started. And I'm hoping for some sort of backing or anything. He just moves on after that. He just asserts something about this gentleman's credibility and moves right on like it's politics as usual to insult somebody like that. But kind of does it. He kind of undercuts his own side's narrative here by standing up for Bill Barr. He says Bill Barr was right to consolidate this under the Delaware U.S. attorney, and it looks bad if a Trump appointee is charging Biden's son. So Barr's actions were actually correct, and it kind of undercuts the narrative that, like, these are all Trump appointees, so they should be on Trump's side, and if they are, that means that everything's right that they're saying. It just, I don't know, I bet Raskin yelled at him for this in the back room after. So we're going to go now to the memes. Old Marjorie Taylor memes. And she's holding something in her hand when we start here. It looks like a prop. She's a prop comic. Like Carrot Top. I'm just going to skip it. She had something in her hand when we started. So her first prop is a SARS report about Hunter's tax write-off done with Oswego Owasco. It's a hard one to write and say. Owasco PC, his tax people, and his tax people. So a SARS report means suspicious activity report. These are from the banks and the tax people as well, the IRS as well. So we are digging into his bank reports that started this investigation in the first place. We're going somewhere different. Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to give us some new information. Or is she? She doesn't say much, actually. She just says it's troubling and doesn't cite what's troubling or why. She just holds up her little prop, says this is troubling, and moves on. So what she move on to? She makes allegations that Hunter Biden and what he did with some of these prostitutes is a violation of the Mann Act, where if a person transports across state lines if a person is transported across state lines for employment and sexual purposes, this is a felony. And that's when we get to see the dick pic that I had up. Oh, that's not the right one. We want this one. It's a dick pic as well as the plane ticket that Hunter Biden paid for to fly his prostitute to him across state lines. So she may have something here in terms of like her legal theory, but he's not being charged with anything under the Mann Act, so she's kind of making legal assertions without actual legal backing, even though she might actually be onto something here, but she goes a little ahead of her skis. So Hunter also used Owasco PC to pay prostitutes because that prostitute was listed as a paralegal for the law firm, while she shows the exact same woman in the dick pics as the prostitute. So that's why she held these up. She wanted to show this woman because this woman is listed as a paralegal at Hunter Biden's corporation, but it's a prostitute. So that's why this got brought up, the memes and the dunks and the I shouldn't have to watch this 6-hour testimony because she held up this picture. That's why she's holding it up. It's actually a fairly solid narrative she's trying to build, even though it doesn't have a tangible legal backing because he's not being charged for it. She's actually done quite a better job than I was expecting from her. And not because she's doing a good job compared to everyone around her, it's because there's such a low bar for her because everyone says she's an idiot. Like this is like the same thing with Joe Biden. Joe Biden's got dementia. He can't even talk. And he gets up on the 2020 debate stage and he does a fine job. He didn't do great, but he did fine. And it set such a low bar for him, the same way calling her stupid set such a low bar for her that when she comes out and just does a normal job that would kind of get overlooked at any other point, she looks exemplary because, again, low bar. So now there's a point of order after she's done. And it's that these SARS reports were handed over to the House in confidence that they would not be made public. And Chairman Comer says that's a fair point and correct. But since these reports were also leaked to the internet and elsewhere for the last few years, they are already public, allowing Ms. Green to comment on them. So she got away with it. Now we're going to move on to this guy. I don't know how to say his name. Mafum. And we're going to turn and see what he has to say. So since Marjorie Taylor Greene got an extra 2.5 minutes on her time, they have to give an extra 2.5 minutes to Democrats, which goes to this guy. He yields it over to AOC. So AOC's going to get 7.5 minutes, which should be fun. It'll be fun. He starts out by attacking the GOP, doing political grandstanding, talking about Trump, repeating the same talking points, doesn't bring up anything new. The funny part of his testimony is he says, keeping it real is 2 words, and that's all I took from it. Skip. Mr. Armstrong is next. Oh, not AOC yet. Mr. Armstrong. So a little bit of grandstanding and mostly nothing new, but he does actually bring up one point that I should cover, which is confirmed by witnesses inside the IRS. They don't care who appointed a U.S. attorney. They don't care who appointed somebody. They expect every one of these people to follow the policies of the department. Exactly. And they had a very high opinion. The 2 witnesses had a very high opinion of U.S. Attorney Weiss at the beginning and during this process until the end. So then they get into Hunter Biden's 2020 potential interview, and we get some new info on that as well. So Hunter Biden was going to be interviewed by the FBI and the IRS, and somehow the Secret Service and thus the Biden transition team were informed on this. They don't really say why yet, but it was Assistant U.S. Attorney Wolf that tipped them off. That you'll find that out later. They were tipped off, and this resulted in the IRS and the FBI never getting the chance to actually interview Hunter Biden. So that's a pretty big deal. I wouldn't say it's obstruction of justice, but it's kind of shady. So now it's AOC time, and she has 7.5 minutes, and she really takes her time here setting up her case. She doesn't really, if you really break it down, she doesn't really say that much, and I was going to cover it in full for the memes, but it's just not a lot. So she's going after witness credibility, and she brings up a lot of previous stated facts to set this up, and Ziegler testified to the Ways and Means Committee that Barr ordered the merger of the D.C. and Delaware investigation under the Delaware U.S. Special Attorney's Office, and that after he made that testimony to the House Ways and Means Committee, Ziegler's attorney sent a letter in saying that he wasn't actually 100% sure of that. And she starts questioning him on his credibility because he's now stating that again today. And Ziegler says that after that, his attorney sent that letter, he went and reviewed a bunch of emails and actually found some emails that refreshed his memory, and he can say 100% with confidence now that he knows that Barr was the one that did that, and he offers to put the email into the record just for that, and she says, okay. So she calls out an inaccuracy between their testimony on special attorney and special prosecutor, in turn calling out Jim Jordan, not the witnesses, I'm sorry. She called out Jim Jordan here, kind of saying he's an idiot, but she did it in a very, very kind way, which I really at the time was appreciating her for. She doesn't say he's stupid. She says he just might be slightly confused, and she says it in a very kind. I was like, oh, cool, look at that. She's not nearly as toxic as she is on social media. And then, like, the next sentence, she gets super toxic. She starts going hard into Jim Jordan, calling him a hypocrite, just saying a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with the hearings and slandering her GOP colleagues and talking about Trump and Trump tweets and getting all how she is on social media, doing her clip harvesting. So, like, she can see why she's on the D team now. If the first half of AOC's testimony was consistent with the second half, her poise, her delivery, her narrative building and whatnot, I would have had nothing but good things to say about her. The first half of her testimony was great. The second half was an Marjorie Taylor Greene level clown show, which if you'll ever hear me talk about these two, I say they're the two sides of the same coin. They really are quite similar, and horseshoe theory is real. Mr. Gozar is next. He's an awkward guy. He looks very strange when he's talking. He has very awkward movements. I had to watch him 2 or 3 times to really hear what he was saying, just because he was like kind of off-putting to watch. I'm not like trying to insult him or anything here. It's just I'm trying to just say it was strange. Like maybe if he has some sort of condition, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that, but like yeah, it was just strange to watch. That being said, he flat out states he's just going to do a recap again for the 10th time, and nothing new comes of this, except for all that we got on this as news is the first time Shapley has not been able to gather and review evidence in any investigation he's ever been involved in. That was the first time this was stated. That's it. So that's 5 minutes summed up. We're going to move on to Miss Brown now. This is, oh man, what a clown show. She comes out swinging with her D-team fists at the GOP. Doesn't even bring up, she doesn't care about the witnesses or anything. She starts talking about racism. She starts talking about climate change. She yields the rest of her time back to Raskin, which is probably the best thing she could have done because this was fucking embarrassing. So we're going to go back to Raskin. I'll pull him up just so you know what he looks like again. Nah, you know what? You got to see him. So Raskin starts going after Jim Jordan again about these letters. You see that the two narratives from these two higher-ranked A-B team members of their party, they're reading the same letters and coming to two different conclusions. And he's saying that in all three of these letters, Weiss states that he was the primary charging authority. He also states in the letter that Weiss could have gotten the authority to charge without cooperation from the D.C. U.S. attorney. So he's kind of saying that Weiss could have prosecuted all along. Raskin backs my point that we need to hear from Weiss first before we actually know this full story. And this is why I think the guy is like one of the best the Democrats has to offer, because he agrees with me, so that means he's smart. Next, we're going to Dr. Fox. Old Granny Fox here, and oh, there she is. There she is, old Granny Fox. She just recaps a bunch of points and talks about the stonewalling again by the GOP. Skip. Mr. Sansbury now, or yeah, no, Mrs. Sansbury. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sansbury. She's Miss. She starts right out by attacking the GOP and uses her whole time to talk about Trump. Skip. All right, Mr. Higgins, what do you got? Mr. Higgins goes right at the Democrats out the gate, starts reiterating the same facts we've heard a bunch of times now. But we did get a couple new factoids from this. Assistant U.S. Attorney and Prosecutor Wolf was the one who said that the raid on Hunter Biden's home at the time, which was Joe Biden's guest house, was bad optics. And the quote, "the juice was not worth the squeeze," came from this testimony here as well. So that's all I really got from here, from Mr. Higgins, that was worth covering. We're going to Mr. Garcia, and he's another prop guy. He's going to tell us the bottom line, too. The dude goes into full low-tier, low-info, left-wing Twitch streamer mode. Pisco. And says that all of Hunter Biden's it's all about Hunter Biden's dick pics, and there's nothing to see here. He brings up no new information, doesn't talk about the facts of the case, and instead talks about the Trump crime family, conspiracy theorists, Rudy Giuliani, the GOP is corrupt, blah, 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 blah. So, what we did learn is that the arms dealer here, who was getting money from China, that they talked about, the key witness for the Democrats, the arms dealer that was lobbying for China, he was an associate of Hunter Biden's, one of Hunter Biden's business partners, and all that money he got from China were the same exact places Hunter Biden got the money from China as well. So it kind of, like, he undercut his own size narrative about trying to damn the credibility of the GOP witness that they don't ever name by name in here, so I'm just not gonna either. You can look that up if you care about it. Now we're gonna go on to Mr. Sessions. And no, it's not Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions is off to his Keebler Elf tree making cookies. This other Mr. Sessions here, I'm going to cover briefly. Actually, you know what? I kind of want to let you know, I kind of want to let you guess how this went. I'll give you a couple seconds, so I'll hit my vape.
But I have a question.
All right, you got your predictions in? Yep, he repeated attacking points, attacked the Democrats, brought up nothing new to the case. What was actually interesting here, though, is that they talk about the IRS retaliation against the two whistleblowers a little bit, and we did learn one new factoid. Actually, no, we didn't learn it here. That's what they talked about. So, nothing relevant. Skip. Mr. Frost is next, and Mr. Frost looks like he's 19 years old. Maybe not there. He looks really young, and I'm sorry if I'm being ageist here, but so far no young people on this House committee have done anything even remotely impressive yet. So I'm not expecting much. And I was right, because he just talks about how corrupt the GOP is and racism and how they're co-opting the term two-tiered justice system, and it really means racism, and Emmett Till and all this George Floyd and things, nothing related. Skip. Just embarrassing, dude. Skip. Now he does yield his time back to my boy Raskin, though. And we're going to hear what Raskin has to say. He brings up the FBI SSA. I have no idea what that means. They never really elaborate what it means. So, and his testimony is that the Assistant Prosecutor Wolf and the U.S. Attorney Weiss were of the highest nonpartisan moral fiber, and this FBI SSA is just going to speak to the credibility of that. But the thing is, this guy was long retired before any of this happened. So, it was just a character witness testimony about Weiss and Wolf from years ago. I think Raskin dropped the ball here a little bit. It kind of brought down my opinion of him slightly, but I still think he's the best the Democrats have to offer at this point, watching this my first time through. So, we're going to go now to Mr. Biggs, the guy from Sex and the City. He starts out by attacking Democrats and bringing up Trump. But this gets into the facts of the case and points out more bad actions taken in 2014 and 2015 with the statute of limitations issues falling off. That was under when Biden was the vice president, actually, that these crimes took place, not Trump. So everything they keep saying, Trump attorney, Trump appointed this, Trump was in office. These crimes took place when Biden was in office, and he points that out. It's a pretty good point, I guess. It kind of refutes their narrative. That's why I wanted to bring it up. That being said, when the statute of limitations fell off, Biden was already the president, and when these U.S. attorneys that were appointed by Biden declined to prosecute, Biden was already president, so they keep saying Trump appointed, but a lot of the people involved in this were Biden appointed as well, or took office when Biden was the vice president and thus Obama appointed. They also get into Hunter associate named Rob Walker, and we talked about his LLC earlier, Robert Walker LLC, and Shapley wanted to interview him. But since they were restricted about asking questions about Dad or the big guy, he never even got the chance to interview this guy. He wasn't allowed to interview somebody directly implicated about things he directly talked about because they were being told they were not allowed to ask questions about Joe Biden, who was involved in a lot of this. They go a little deeper into this and see why they wanted to talk to Joe Biden. It was because Hunter wrote off Joe Biden's hotel room. Yeah, this is where this actually comes from, is Mr. Biggs' 5 minutes. So Joe Biden hotel rooms were written off on Hunter Biden's taxes, saying that they were business partners and had business dealings together. Now, Ziegler says that this is not proof of guilt, but what it should have done is it should have inspired more investigation, interviews, and follow-up, which they were denied. They also wanted to get location data on Joe Biden to find out where he was when Hunter Biden claimed he was sitting right next to him, and they were also denied that. They were not able to look into the subject of this investigation's father, who was cited all over this investigation. And again, Hunter could have been lying about it all. We don't have the proof. But the only reason we don't have the proof is because they were denied access to investigate. And that's why they're blowing the whistle. So it's pretty credible in that regard, but it's not proven. That's all we really got from Mr. Big's testimony. Otherwise, it was just crap. Now we're going to go on to Miss Lee, and guess what she does? Pulls out some props about the two-tier justice system, talks about Trump, the GOP, and racism. Nothing relative to what we're talking about at the hearing, so skip. Yeah, she does go back to my boy Raskin, and here's where Raskin really drops the ball. Instead of going back to any of his previous narratives or going after Jim Jordan or anything like that, he starts doubling down on her claims of racism. And it's like, bro, you were doing so good. Like, I talked Raskin up so early. I thought so highly of him for the first 2/3 of this hearing, and like this was just like, bro. So Mr. Girthman is next. Little restating, little grandstanding. Obviously, he's setting up his groundwork. Every one of them sets up their groundwork with restating the facts that we've already heard. But he actually opens up the floor to Ziegler to opine about some things he was cut off for previously. which I really respect. And the reason I do is because a lot of these people seem like they're clip farming for campaign purposes, and this guy does none of that. And I just kind of, it makes me think a little more highly of him. There are some stand-up people on both the Democrat and Republican side here in this House committee. Not all or most of them, but a couple. So Ziegler reached out to the other IRS agents who didn't want to come out about this, didn't want to risk their careers or become whistleblowers, and he just asked them to read over his transcript and see if he got anything wrong. And every one of them that was investigating Hunter Biden with him said that his statements were 100% accurate and backed him fully. Now, this is just from Ziegler's mouth, so you got to take him at his word for that, but he's testifying under oath, so there is that. So then he lets Shapley opine for a bit as well. Shapley, he says, he basically just asked these guys, is there anything you wanted to say that you were cut off for or didn't have the time to get to? And Shapley he states that criminal tax attorneys are only advisory. So if a criminal tax attorney and a prosecutor inside the IRS doesn't agree with the charges, they're advisory, and never once in his career has a disagreement with a criminal prosecutor inside the IRS stopped him from recommending charges. So the fact that anyone would even disagree with him, they did it in this case, but if they did, it still wouldn't have stopped him from the prosecutorial report that he crafted. He states in this case that the line attorney agreed, a panel of four prosecutors agreed, the senior leadership of the CT council agreed, and made them change it to, so the senior leadership of the CT council initially agreed, but then later on they changed their mind and then tried to gaslight Mr. Shapley, saying that they never agreed. But he said he presented evidence that was never actually shown here in the hearing, but he's presented evidence that the line attorney said she gave the yellow light to move forward, and the CT council concurred originally and then changed their mind and pretended like they never changed their mind, like they always said no. And there is apparently evidence in the record to back this up. So now we're going to go to Mr. Cesar, and Mr. Cesar I normally would skip, but there's something about him I really like. He does a bunch of political grandstanding, attacks millionaires and billionaires, kind of like Bernie Sanders light, attacks the GOP, blah, blah, blah. But he does it in a way that's like very poised, polite, professional. And I think that just his demeanor alone, he has some leadership qualities there. If he could rein in his talking points a little bit better, he just kind of seemed like a very stand-up guy. And he said that like we should be looking into other people for these exact same charges. Would you like to do that? And several of the GOP members, a couple of them signed on and said, yeah, we can do that, but not today. So otherwise, skip. He gives the rest of his time to Mr. Goldman, and Mr. Goldman here kind of becomes my A-team member of the Democrats. I think by the end of this, I had a higher opinion of this guy than Raskin, because he did a pretty damn good job at setting up his narratives, even if they did fall flat a little bit. So this guy, he wants to talk about the Washington Post article and about the gun charges, which is the only person that brings up these gun charges. And he wants to talk about the leaker, how this information got out to the public when it wasn't supposed to. And he wants to use this attack to attack Shapley's credibility. So he goes after Shapley about this, and Shapley says, like, you can read the article, they didn't say their source was law enforcement, and the Washington Post, when they get a law enforcement source, will state that in their article. They didn't hear. I don't know if that's an adequate defense, but I don't know. It's, I guess, a decent back and forth. So since he only got the rest of Cesar's time, we're going to go to Mr. Donalds next. I think this guy also has, he's the first black GOP member we're going to see, and I think the only one we're going to see today. But I think he's got some leadership qualities too. He did a good job setting up his case, and he applied passion in the right places. I liked him as a speaker. I don't know if I 100% agree with his points, but I think he was solid. So it seems like we're going to recap points we have already heard about the prostitution, but let's see where it's going. He also seems like he has a future as at least a B team member. I think he's already almost as good as Jim Jordan, if not better, which isn't that high of a bar. He brings up reports made about Hunter living a lavish lifestyle based on company profits. The company profits being the 19 million, or some of the 19 million that went into his accounts, of his company accounts. And he asked the agents if this were happening with anybody besides Hunter Biden, would this be a basis for at least an investigation? And they say absolutely yes. So just to show that it's not partisan, not going after Hunter for no reason, he digs a little deeper on this subject, and then we see. Oh, he digs a little deeper than we've been on the subject and about investigation practices. When Hunter said he was sitting with data, is it important to follow up and get location data? Because if he was lying, as Assistant Prosecutor Wolf alludes to, we need to know that. So they state in any other investigation, this would be the necessary next step. And the fact that they were denied this is a huge red flag for them. So we're on to recess at the 4th hour, and we're going to come back to Miss Crockett. First off, oh my God. Hello, Miss Crockett. Is the Miss part mean you're still single? What's up, girl? She clarifies that, I'm sorry, I got heart emoji eyes right now. She clarifies that Garland and Joe Biden are not directly implicated to have anything to do with this investigation, which is correct. But she then goes off on Trump and the GOP a little bit, which is kind of grandstanding, but she's my wife, so it's okay. She's breaking down the process where an investigator charges. Oh, she's a former prosecutor, so she's kind of breaking down the process. Actually, I think she said she was a former defense attorney, but yeah, she's a professional lawyer, very educated, very concise with her speaking, very good at her job. But she starts bringing up the process of when an investigation team wants to push things to a prosecutor, and how prosecutors, kind of Raskin's point about how prosecutors are the masters of the courtroom, where investigators know nothing about the courtroom, so it's really up to their discretion whether they should charge things, and blah, blah, blah. And they get into a little back and forth about the fact that, like, the prosecutors that the IRS was working with agreed that these charges should be filed. At least the ones internal to the IRS, the DOJ tax division. So, I'm curious here, this is completely off topic, but why do we hear so much about AOC and the squad when this woman is available to be like the face of Young Democrats? She was incredibly good at what she, like, I almost wanted to side with her because she was so good and likable and all that. Now, I feel like her point here was kind of a swing and a miss. The IRS investigators, apparently, according to Shapley, have always been involved in the process every step of the way for this and most other investigations he's worked. So that's how he knew that they sided with the charges. And the fact that the prosecutors in the IRS say they should be charged, and then he got stonewalled and he got gaslit, was a huge red flag for him. So I might be blinded at love at first sight here, but I think she did a killer job. And until she goes off topic, talking about Trump, the GOP being bad, racism, and doing her clip farming, but it's only for a little bit at the end, and I excuse her. She's perfect. So we're going to go to Mr. LeTurner next. Actually, let's just say one more final. Goodbye, Miss Crockett. I'll miss you. So, Mr. LeTurner next. More recapping that we already know, just reiterating the same things. A bunch here was out of the norm, stonewalling happened, blah, 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 we get it, nothing new. Skip. On to Mr. Gomez. Mr. Gomez is next, and he makes the claim that the proper steps were not followed in the whistleblower process. This is new. He's saying these gentlemen, maybe he's calling into question their integrity, or maybe like the whistleblower, not their integrity, but the process of the integrity of the whistleblower process. That's what he's calling into question here. So he says proper steps were not taken, proper people were not interviewed. There were up to 50 people that should have been interviewed about this that weren't, and the evidence is being cherry-picked to call these guys whistleblowers. And that's a pretty solid claim, I feel like. I think he did a good job laying down this case. And if the GOP wanted to seem better than what they claim the January 6th investigation was, then they should have done these things. Absolutely. They shouldn't be cherry-picking information. They made all these claims about the January 6th committee, and here they are doing the same thing, apparently, or allegedly. So, His next point is that since Jim Jordan got a document that was from the internet, it's less credible because it came from the internet. And that somehow means it's not credible. And even though a lot of these things, the laptop that he got it from was verified to be Hunter Biden's, and the iCloud leak was verified to be Hunter Biden's, it's just because it came from the internet, it's not credible. And this really falls flat. He came out so strong with his first point. His second point was just kind of stupid. He yields the rest of his time back to Mr. Goldman, the Walpole article guy, and he goes back into his leak theory and tries to get Shapley on another point here, that the leak, Shapley said at one point that this, at first glance, the leak looks like it came from the agent level. And he asked him about that, and Shapley says after he later clarified those statements and said he disagrees with them after further investigation into it. Doesn't look like it came from the agent level, but it does come from somebody that had knowledge of what the investigating agents were doing. So it could have been a lot more people, not just the agent level, but from within the IRS at the very least. So that's all we got out of this guy. Mr. Fallon now gets his chance, and let's see how he uses it. Mr. Fallon. I like his suit. I really like that color. I would wear that. He starts out by attacking Democrats and politically grandstanding, but in the way he's doing it, he's actually pushing back on their narrative, so I'm not going to skip it like I did for most of the GOP that attacked Democrats here. He points out that these two men are not political activists. They aren't even on the same side of politics. They have nothing to gain from this and everything to lose. And then he goes after my boy Raskin and calls him, first says he did a very skilled job so far, which I agree with, other than his last point about racism. He lets Ziegler address Raskin's claims where he was cut off. That Raskin claimed there was nothing here out of the ordinary, and this is just a squabble between prosecutors and investigators, and he allows both witnesses to respond, and they both say they have enough proof to show that Raskin's claims are not valid. His next point is that there was evidence that the IRS wanted to access, and since the Biden team was tipped off on this investigation, they had time to sanitize that. So when Hunter Biden closed down his company, or he was not closing it down, he was moving it, Owasco PC, everything was in a storage unit, and the IRS wanted to get a warrant to that storage unit, and Wolf said no. And then, well, first she said that that storage unit couldn't be accessed for 30 days, and then they could execute the warrant, and then she said no, which both things baffled the investigators. They should have just got their warrant and went in as they thought, and she's adding all this extra criteria to it that they'd never encountered prior to this. And she's also the same person that tipped off the Hunter Biden team that there was an interview coming, the Joe Biden transition team, that there was an interview coming for Hunter Biden. And these actions from Wolf directly is what was Ziegler's red line coming forward as a whistleblower. But I really think we still need to hear from Wolf as well before we make any ultimate conclusions on who was right and wrong there. Let me hit my vape and I'll continue. Now we're back to Mr. Goldman and his full amount of time. And again, I think this guy, after watching him, is the real A-team member. He should be the ranking member. He's good. So he's recapping first to set up his points in a very calm and concisive way. This guy seems capable and is talking about facts, so let's hear him out. He's now using Shapley to debunk a claim that Senator Chuck Grassley made, which is like, you're trying to dunk on the GOP here? That's what you were setting up for, dude? Like, it was only like a couple seconds, so I'm not gonna fault his whole thing for it, but really, dude, you were just trying to dunk on Chuck Grassley? Come on. Next, he goes into Rob Walker and the big guy, and when asked about Rob Walker, he has zero. When Rob Walker was interviewed, he said he had zero knowledge of Hunter Biden's involvement Joe Biden's involvement in Hunter's business actions. And this is one of Hunter Biden's closest business partners saying, I had no knowledge Joe Biden was involved at all. Rob Walker's witness statement also shows that Biden showed up to a lunch, and the GOP were trying to use this as proof that he was like part of a business meeting, but Rob Walker's statement said he just showed up to the lunch, said hey to everybody, hey, how you doing, and got out of there. He didn't actually attend the meeting. So that kind of debunks one of their outside of this hearing claims, but it's something that they're setting up for their narrative, so I wanted to cover it. He's now asking outside the confines of the report, and so they can't answer without the Ways and Means Committee approving them, being allowed to talk about X, Y, and Z things. So then he goes into a 99-page report that these two witnesses never actually saw, written by the DOJ and the U.S. attorneys, as to why they did not go after these felony charges. His argument here directly backs Raskin's points from earlier, and I can see why people have given this guy extra time. There is more to prosecution than the investigators get to see, and he has 10 years as a prosecutor, and after reading that 99-page report, he fully understands why the prosecutors didn't charge. Now, this does not refute the claims that most of the prosecutors within the IRS agreed with the investigators. It doesn't refute that at all. It just says he can understand why Weiss and Wolf didn't charge. And he did a really good job, I think, overall, besides his one point trying to dunk on Chuck Grassley. So we're going to go to Mr. Perry now. Mr. Perry is up, and he starts out by bashing Democrats for trying to impeach Trump and talking about Ukraine, which not pertinent to the facts of Ukraine, like the Ukraine impeachment, like stuff that has nothing to do with anything. He starts with, so I skipped all that, but he starts with stating facts of the case about stonewalling in order to set up what he's about to ask about, and asks Shapley to restate some of the points about this, and his red line. He allows him to elaborate a little more on his red line meeting with Weiss. Shapley states that Ziegler was obstructed from investigating, and they threw legal repercussions at Ziegler. This is a very bold claim, and if true, I think it really is the most strong point discussed about the double standard of justice talking point from the GOP. It really backs their point substantially. They call it, Ziegler calls it the 6E grand jury threat. And he said that he's heard other IRS agents say that for touchy cases like this has also been thrown at them to get them to stop investigating what they were looking into. But he's never personally had it thrown at him until this investigation. Now, Mr. Perry invokes 5 U.S.C. 2303B13, saying that an unlawful gag order was placed on these two gentlemen, and this is obstruction of justice by the Treasury Department. So he's making MGT-like claims that there is a crime here that's not being charged of obstruction of justice. That's about all that was unique from his testimony. So we're going to go into the next person, Mr. Moskowitz. I'm glad I'm Polish, I can say that. Mr. Moskowitz is next. He wants to refute that any action was taken against them as whistleblowers. And how does he back that up? By talking about Trump. And here's how he links that. I was going to skip this, but I thought this was really like some YouTube or some leftist Twitch streamer sophistry. He uses the claims from Trump and GOP, the GOP not caring about Trump's actions from 5 years ago, to try to discredit these witnesses because he says their credibility is shot because the GOP invited them to this hearing. So he's making a guilt by association smear. It's real bad. It's real bad. Probably this guy here did the worst job. He looks like Lance of the Surfs, and I'm guessing that like this is Lance's day job. He did such a terrible job. Now back to the clown show. Lauren Boebert, yeah. She's asked specifically about China. She's going to make a China narrative here, so she wants to bring up the facts around the 3 entities that gave Hunter Biden money from China. CEFC particularly is brought up again, because almost none of her questions are within the confines of the report. She gets no answers for any of them, and I think she's doing that intentionally because she doesn't want answers, because she's trying to set up a narrative. That's the only thing I can assess from this. She goes off topic and starts opining about China, and she's getting really worked up. She's like, she skipped a couple words in her sentences, and like really was like getting like anxious over nothing. And she starts asking questions about their personal feelings and such. Like, I want to know about the facts of the case, not their personal feelings. And she flat out says here that her goal is just to go after the Democrats. It's just not a good job. Lauren Boebert's a joke. And we're on to Miss McLean. Miss McLean, yeah. Now, as a human being, not as like a lawyer or as a politician, just as a human being, hands down my favorite person. So we're in the final hour. She brings up the WhatsApp messages, and I guess we're going to take a dive into that. I'm all ears, but she comes off as snarky a little bit, and then she immediately stops what she's doing and apologizes and rephrases, and I was like, wow, like, she just seems like a stand-up person. Now, none of her questions can really get answered because the rest of the WhatsApp conversation with my dad sitting next to me and all that needs to be released by the Ways and Means Committee before they can discuss it. She shifts to Tony Bobolinsky, and he is the... I forgot they mentioned his name. He's the felon gun-toting Chinese worker that is the star witness for the GOP. His name's Tony Bobolinsky. He was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. He was a very close business associate with Hunter, and she wants to ask some questions about him, but they also can't comment on that unless the House Ways and Means Committee tells them they can. Yet, she seems really honest. Like, she doesn't seem to be forming a narrative like Lauren Boebert was. She gets blocked on a question when she's asking about a guy named James Gilliard. I don't even know his involvement because they don't even bring him up otherwise. Her point here seems to be about the WhatsApp message is not a smoking gun, which, you know, the agents, the two witnesses back up. It's not a smoking gun, but it should have been a point where they turn around and investigate more. She ran out of time, but watching her, I couldn't tell if she was a Democrat or Republican, just based on her questions and her demeanor and all that. I didn't know. I couldn't tell if she was a Democrat or Republican because she did such a fair, balanced, and good job. What a good human. I wish more politicians were like her in terms of just her honesty or integrity. I liked her. We're up to Mr. Burchett. There he is. And it's going to be a tough act to follow because that she was a class act. And let's see how he does it. Oh, fear-mongering. We're going to lose our country. He's praying tonight. He's praying after this hearing that we don't lose our country. It's just like he was praying after Joe Biden got elected that we don't lose our country. It's stupid, man. Like, Ziegler is accused by the Biden legal team. Oh, yeah, this is big. So in the media, it doesn't have a lot to do with the case. It has a bit to do with the credibility of Ziegler. But he's being accused by the Hunter Biden legal team of leaking these SARS reports, and there's no actual proof that it was him. It doesn't add to the case, but it does speak to the credibility of the witnesses. Apparently, somebody who also has the same last name, Ziegler, put out a bunch of fake news about this guy, and he goes off on that for a bit. But basically what they're saying is these claims that the guy who leaked these SARS reports is not verified. And we pivot to the facts of the case, and he's talking about Burisma info to set up a potential point. Here we get to him saying Burisma money was sent to Rosemont Seneca Bohai. I think I said that right. Rosemont Seneca Bohai and Hunter's business partner, Devin Archer. And I think that's all I got out of that. We couldn't talk about Devin Archer because the House Ways and Means Committee has to release it first, and otherwise it was just grandstanding, a little bit of fear-mongering. Now let's get to Mr. Fry. I think the rest are all Republicans, too. I'm not sure. He's asking Ziegler to speculate if Joe Biden was lying when he made an incorrect statement about Hunter Biden getting money from China, which I think he just wanted to bring that up, that Hunter Biden got money from China again, just like Lauren Boebert did. He's asking them to speculate. They obviously can't. Looks like he's clip farming. And he keeps just bringing up things that Joe Biden said that didn't happen to be true. It comes off as political grandstanding. Yeah, so I'm just going to skip that. Mr. Edwards. Oops, I'm a little too far there. Mr. Edwards. There he is. Hey, buddy. Mr. Edwards. We're now back to retreading the laptop and how they were denied access to all but what they were allowed to see by the prosecutors. Nothing new on that. We pivot to the guest house raid, and that they were denied over optics of the fact that Joe Biden was running in the primary, and nothing new there either. So skip. At least he talked about the facts, though. He wasn't smearing, really. If he would have went sooner, I would have covered him fully. He was so late in the game that like everything he brings up is already discussed. I'm not like trying to shit on the guy. He did an alright job. Mr. Langworthy is next. There he is, out of Buffalo. I'm from Buffalo. I don't live there anymore, but so not much new. A bit of grandstanding. Ziegler gets his chance to speak freely, though, about the 99-page memo that he didn't actually get the chance to read. All he knows about it is what was made public by the media and whatnot, and he's looked into it. So he wants Congress. He said he doesn't know enough about this, and he requests that Congress, if and when they get Mr. Weiss in front of them, they ask a question about this memo, because in there, and in the DOJ's major count policy, when you charge a misdemeanor that's tied to a felony, you also have to charge the felony, and it's stated in that memo. And for legal reasons that are above my head, that's the case. But Shapley he chimes in to talk about the DOJ's major count policy a little bit, which is taught to IRS agents that backs what Ziegler's saying, and also charging the felony if you charge the misdemeanor. They also get the chance to stress that because of the history of the IRS, for most of this process, they were convinced that everyone they were working with were doing the right thing, and they thought Weiss was a great guy, they thought Wolf was a great person. Until their red line was crossed, they had the utmost faith in the institution they were working for, and that's all we knew that we really got out of Mr. Langworthy's 5 minutes. Not that he did a bad job or anything grimy, but Mr. Burleson, and this is the second last speaker. If you look down here, we're almost done. Repeating, grandstanding, a few jokes. He was a little funny. Comparisons to things that are off topic to boil down and obfuscate, and speculating about the Bidens. He asked them to reiterate what they weren't allowed to investigate, and nothing new came out of it. We do get one piece of new knowledge that the Foreign Agent Registration Act was violated at some point, with Hunter and his family members collecting money and partners collecting this money. That's all we get out of here that's new. Miss Luna is up, and I think she's the last one. She looks really young. I think the reason she had to speak last is because she's a young member, and like everyone else in the GOP, like he's older than her by like 20 years. So she starts up by bringing up facts around discovery and the laptop, and she's the one that actually confirms in the hearing that the laptop was verified by the FBI. She's polite, professional, charming, but nothing new. If she went sooner, I'd cover her more. She makes a pretty damning narrative against the media and people withholding the laptop before the 2020 election, but I don't know, it seems like she's kind of trying to use that to dunk on the media and maybe the 2020 election a bit. I don't know. It just didn't have a lot to do with this. So now we have closing statements. Raskin had to go, I think, and AOC's making the closing statement. Comer gives her a compliment. He's very charming, and she gives him a nice little smile. Alex Stein is going to be very angry about that. So AOC, the summary of her closing statement: this is nothing out of the ordinary. U.S. attorneys decline to prosecute 90% of the time, and this is nothing different. Weiss and even the witnesses said some of the charges weren't that strong, but nothing wrong happened here, and there's no proof that anything nefarious happened here. This hearing is just something pushed by Trump to hurt Biden in the next election. She claims Burisma is debunked, which don't think so. And everything being claimed by the GOP is a conspiracy theory. There are also abuse They're also being very abusive to poor Hunter Biden here. Abusive. They're being abusive. But she also says that we can come to these conclusions the GOP wants, but we need to hear from whites. So I agree with that. This is a waste of time, and we should be doing more left-wing politics like climate change and racism and blah, blah, blah instead. Then Cobra gets his chance to do his summaries. This is exactly what the committee is made for, to investigate things like these. He does a couple passive-aggressive mini dunks on the Democrats, but very subtle. The laptop that was being withheld was vital to the investigation, and we know the Bidens took in tens of millions of dollars. Then Hunter Biden lied on his taxes and Joe Biden used his position of power. Hunter uses positions of power as the vice president's son to strong-arm people like in China. The whistleblowers have been smeared, and they are actually the victims here, not Hunter Biden. Their accusations against Hunter directly implicate Joe Biden based off of how close they work together, as well as accusations of dad and the big guy. And the fact that they weren't able to follow up on these is damning to the credibility of some of the institutions that we have. We know about the shell companies and Hunter Biden set up bank laundering through bank statements and blah, 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 and he just thinks it's awful that none of this was charged. So that's it. How did I do? I tried to call it pretty honest balls and strikes, sum it all up, cut out the repeating information and the bullshit, and I got it down to about an hour and 30 minutes. So see you later.